Hey, and welcome to the Urban Monk. Dr. Pedram Shojai, hanging out in studio in sunny Southern California, enjoying some time home for a little bit. There are so many things going on in all of our lives. Reminds me of the Henry Ford quote, obstacles are the scary things you see when you take your eyes off your goal. My guest today was waving to mannequins and his eyes stopped working. And by the age of 25, he could not see. So imagine having this thing called life that you've planned and you're living and the trajectory is flowing, and then all of a sudden you get a diagnosis that takes away your vision. He is the author of a new book called Eyes Wide Open. Isaac Lidsky has turned it around from believing it was a death sentence into being a powerful tool in his life, and is now teaching how to take some of the principles of said lesson to apply it into our lives. So hi, welcome to the Urban Monk.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing this work. We live in a culture where it's really easy to roll over and die, to go woe is me, feel sorry for ourselves, all those narratives that start to boot up. And you didn't. You fought and you found a way. So what was that like, man? How long did it take to really start turning that corner and being like, look, I can't go down like this?
At first when I was diagnosed, I was terrified. And I did think, as you said, that blindness would ruin my life, was a death sentence for my independence and achievement. But the way that I lost my sight sort of progressively over time, which produced all these sort of bizarre effects, I literally saw firsthand that sight itself is this masterful illusion, right? You think that you open your eyes and there's the world, seeing is believing, sight is truth. But the reality is that our minds are hard at work creating this virtual reality for ourselves that involves a lot more than just information from the eyes. It's frankly only about 10% information from the eyes, 90% information from elsewhere in the brain. And yet it feels so real. And the big sort of aha moment for me, the big insight for me, was to realize that that's true of so much of our lives. So much of our lives that we experience as immutable truth kind of beyond our control is really in our minds. And it's up to us, literally in every moment, to choose who we want to be and how we want to live our lives. And once I saw that, I made some better choices for myself.
That's interesting. So you have this lights out type of event that's happening, and so there's so much data, and we live in a very visually kind of dominant reality, right? Where what you see is what you get, and all this kind of stuff. And so with that of the five senses getting peeled away, and then you're left in the dark with your thoughts, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, and all that. How does that start to, do you have to reallocate processor bandwidth to other areas? Does it start to increase your intuition? Does it get you to become more introspective? What's that shift in your orientation when that starts to happen?
So yeah, we are inherently visual creatures, as you say. About a third of our brain by volume is devoted to the experience of sight. And in any moment, in any second, the sort of visual cortex can claim up to 2/3 of your brain's processing resources. So as that goes away, when that goes away, you have a lot of free cycles, as you put it. And I started paying a lot more attention to my ears, to touch. Memory became more like a sense in a very interesting way. And it's amazing. The human organism is infinitely adaptable. And it's amazing what our senses can do for us. We don't really ask them to do all that much other than sight, because again, we're so visual. But really the lessons that I learned, the insights that I gained along the way really aren't about blindness or even disability per se. It's really about the opportunity we all have to live with awareness and accountability and intention and purpose in life.
Amen. To me, you're like the ultimate alchemist, right? Turning lead to gold and transmuting that. So, you got a heck of a resume. Before all this, you were Weasel by Saved by the Bell,
Right.
and then graduated Harvard College, age 19, degree in mathematics, computer science, Harvard Law School, law clerk to Supreme Court Justices Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And then you transformed a struggling $15 million concrete business into a $150 million business, started the Hope for Vision Foundation, and it goes on and on and on. So not only did you not roll over and die, you got a long list of accomplishments. So how did you pivot that? Because that to me is really powerful. That's an amazing thing that someone can choose to do versus rolling over and giving up and feeling sorry for themselves.
Yeah, it's going blind turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. It really did. Because those insights that I gained into our power and our responsibility to sort of shape the daily experience we want for ourselves, there was no escaping that. And, I put it to work throughout my life. So, the self-limiting assumptions we make about ourselves, the kind of lies we tell ourselves about what our purported strengths and weaknesses look like, the way we sometimes get confused about what success really is and what value really is in our own lives, our misconceptions about luck, all of these things, the way in which I went blind, I learned to really refocus and hold myself accountable, to be aware of the choices I was making in every moment for how I was living my life. And the upshot was, as you say, I've been blessed to do a lot of really neat things in my life as a result. I've been able to see beyond my fears and really pursue the goals, the objectives, the things that are important to me in my life. And it's brought me immeasurable joy and fulfillment and success. And like I said, really going blind turned out to be a real blessing.
It's interesting. It took you going blind to realize that you never were seeing clearly in the first place, right?
That's exactly right.
And that's powerful. And so, that speaks a lot to the human condition. The Buddhists say that, most of us are walking around like hungry ghosts, right? Just absolutely unaware of what we're doing and where we think we're going. So what are some signs? So, we got people out there listening to this, watching this, and going, okay, well, where am I in this? Where am I not seeing clearly?
Well, one of the real sort of pernicious forces in our lives is fear, and fear can really sort of distort and warp our realities. It's natural for us to feel fear. It's useful in many ways, certainly evolutionarily. It's very important. But fear can be pretty devastating. So I think a good place to start for folks is really to be on the lookout for things that they're afraid of. Another thing is, first and foremost, I think too often we can go through our lives without asking ourselves the questions that are maybe daunting in their magnitude, but they're pretty important. What is important to me? How do I want to be spending my time, professionally and personally? What kind of a spouse do I want to be? What kind of a employer do I want to be? What kind of a parent do I want to be? These are questions that we are answering every day of our lives, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not. So to me, better to do it purposefully, right? Better to do it with awareness and some deliberation than sort of by happenstance.
Yeah, like anything, either you're intending to do it and you're focused on it and you're clear on it, or you're stumbling through life, which is, I think what most people consider life, right? And so everyone's got these New Year's resolutions and all these things that they try to kind of recalibrate once a year, and then they go back into their stumble.
Choosing not to choose who you want to be and how you want to live your life is itself a choice.
And a pretty dark one at that, right? Because then the advertisers, the politicians, someone's going to choose for you, right?
Oh, no shortage of people willing to choose for you.
Yeah, that's it. Their entire industry is built around that. So how do we take this perspective and call it a lens or a filter, if you will, this eyes wide open lens, and use it in our lives, in personal life, in our business life, our family life? Like how can we use this perspective building tool?
Sure. So, for me, it's a learned discipline. It takes effort. Even, for me, it's a daily aspiration. It's something that, frankly, some days I'm not so good at, other days I'm better at. But, I really try to sort of break it down thematically into kind of different different challenges or different threats to our ultimate sort of control over the reality we create for ourselves. So, we can talk about ways to try to see through fear. We can talk about ways to confront, our the things we tell ourselves about ourselves and what others might be thinking or feeling about us, and the way we feel about luck, the way we face ongoing struggle. So, I wish there were a one-size-fits-all answer, but it kind of depends on context.
Yeah, sure. I remember growing up, my sister and I took piano lessons from a couple brothers who had, I don't know what the diagnosis was, I was a kid, but they were diagnosed with something that was going to take away their eyesight, and their parents doubled down very quickly and got them into piano. And they both became very, very good, accomplished pianists who then became piano instructors. And so I grew up with somebody teaching me piano for a few years who could not see. And it was amazing understanding the kind of perspective building energy that comes to someone who had something and had it taken away. And most people are walking around with something that they take for granted. So they choose not to see, right? They choose not to actually see into what's happening in their lives. And it's big, whether it's something that's happening at work, whether it's something that's unsaid in your marriage, right? Most people have all kinds of crazy interpersonal stuff that's happening and things they should probably be apologizing for yesterday that they're not willing to look at until it's too late. And then, when it's too late, isn't it?
Yeah, it's you said a lot there. There's a lot of moving pieces in there, but certainly the default seems that it's easier to count our burdens than our blessings, which can get us into trouble, as you say, because we manifest what we measure in life. So in many ways we can often be our own worst enemies. When I was first diagnosed with my blinding disease, I was living a race against time. I was certain that if and when I finally went blind, or sight wasn't so useful, that would be the end for me. So I had all these awful thoughts about this boogeyman blindness that was going to ruin my life, and I was cheering for these research scientists, just desperate for them to cure my disease. And this was an awful world built of my fears. But I believed it, and it left me on the sideline. Right, I was not in control of my own fate. I was, rooting against blindness and cheering on these scientists and hoping for the Hollywood ending. And looking back, it's amazing to me. Much like the experience of sight itself, we can experience our fears as are so real. We awfulize, we agonize. And yet it can feel so real. And if we're not careful, if we're not aware, it becomes real. It's sort of self-realizing or self-perpetuating, just by virtue of us believing it. So we just have such an awesome power, the human mind, that, if we're careful to understand, appreciate, and harness the power of our own minds, it's just amazing. It's a gift.
Okay, so here you are paralyzed by fear. And you are in a bad way. You are betting for some sort of Hollywood ending, and the fear is starting to choke you up. How do you transform it? There's so many people in, whether it's healthcare or just life, that are stuck right on that fear spot. And some turn to faith in God, or whatever that narrative is. What was your transition out of that?
Yes, there's a longer version of the story, but in essence, I wound up in the office of a low vision rehabilitation specialist, a woman who was an occupational therapist who specialized in folks who were, partially sighted and blind. And I showed up just assuming, really not having even given it any thought, I just assumed we were going to be talking about blindness, this awful thing, this distant, hopefully distant, this future that I had to prepare myself for, tomorrow, the future. And she was, she right off the bat, she wanted to talk about practical questions about what I was doing day in and day out to sort of take control. And, was I bumping into things? Did I use a cane? And I remember being so confused and thinking I need to explain to her how little I care about bumping into things, about, today is not my problem. Now is not my problem. My problem is the future and all this awful stuff, and my problem is I'm losing my sight, and there's nothing I can do about it. And she made a comment to me, if you used a cane, you'd bump into things less and you'd hurt yourself less. And it sounds silly. I'm only a little embarrassed to admit it, but I had an epiphany. I realized right there in her office that everything I thought I knew about going blind or being blind was a complete lie, born of my fears. And worse, I had done nothing to learn about going blind or being blind. In a sense, I had to confront the fact that I was choosing to live in that world. Because there really only is now, this moment. That's all there ever is. So in that moment, I decided, whenever I felt afraid, I would ask myself, what precisely is my problem right now, discrete, manageable today, that I face, that I can do about it? And two, what's the best thing that I can do about it? Just me. No heroes, no villains, no one to pray to for rescue or blame. Just me. What can I do about it? And when I made the decision there in her office that day to confront my fears in that way, my life really turned around. It was the beginning of a long process, to be sure, but it was a turning point.
But you remember, what did you feel that day was the turning point, or looking back, you realized, okay, so it hit you like a gong, you're like, okay.
Oh, it hit me.
Yeah.
It really was this realization, because I was trapped in sort of fear's myopic kind of tunnel of awfulness. And I was so confused. I literally had not left room for today, right now, this moment. What can I do to make my life a little easier or a little better? And the realization that those were probably some pretty good questions for me to be thinking about. It really hit me hard.
Yeah, what an angel. I mean, she helped rewire you from the sky is falling to just being good at being here.
Yeah.
And obviously you then took that as kind of a template and started applying it in life. And so I'm assuming some of this, so at 25, so how much of your education was post blindness, or did you already get all that in first?
So, by the time I was, in junior, senior in college, 18, 19 years old, my sight was kind of moving from nuisance to disability. It was a real challenge to read printed text. It was something, frankly, I tried to avoid at all costs because it was awkward and frustrating. And then, it sort of got worse going into law school and all that. So that really in my early to mid 20s, my sight ceased to be all that useful to me. And by the time I was 25, I was essentially, without any sight.
Okay, and at that point, then you're doing corporate work. You're going into this concrete company. How do you then apply things?
So I had what I call an 8-year joyride in law, 7-8 year joyride in law. I went studied at Harvard Law School, which was just an incredible experience. And then I had a clerkship with a federal judge, and then I worked for the U.S. Justice Department. I got to litigate appeals all over the country. I was a year out of law school, arguing my own appeals. It was crazy.
What age was this? What age?
This was, I must have been, this is like 24, 25, 26, talking now. And anyway, then I, lifelong dream, got to clerk for 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices, Justices O'Connor and Ginsburg, which was amazing. Long story shorter, when I kind of made the obvious, quote unquote, choice at the end of all this to go work for a big international law firm, took a huge signing bonus, great salary and fancy office, and great business cards and all that. I pretty quickly found myself very dissatisfied with my career. Now, that's not to say that law is not plenty of people enjoy practicing law, find meaning in it, find their success in it, and that's great. The problem is I'm not one of those people. So, putting my money where my mouth is, so to speak, on my eyes wide open philosophy or vision. When I was sitting there in my fancy, Manhattan skyscraper office, realizing that this was not important to me and this wasn't what I wanted to be doing, I abandoned my legal career. I stepped away from the practice of law and partnered up with my college roommate. He kept his fancy day job in the world of finance, but I quit mine, and he helped me buy a small, struggling business in Orlando, Florida, in residential construction, an industry I knew nothing about. And if you think I'm crazy, my wife, Dorothy's even crazier. She supported me in all this. And we moved down from Manhattan to Orlando for me to serve as the chief executive officer of our new business.
Of a struggling business.
Yeah, did that in June of 2011.
What the hell prompted you to do that?
You know, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I thought I did a lot of sort of soul searching on what was important to me, what I wanted in my life and in my career. First and foremost, I wanted a better quality of life for my family. I wanted to get out of the sort of 90-hour a week, rat race, stress and tension and all that. I wanted to live in a home that had a yard. I wanted to get home from work early enough to play with my kids in that yard and maybe have dinner with my wife. Career-wise, it may sound silly, but I wanted a job I could explain to my children. So my wife Dorothy gave birth to our triplets. In September of 2010.
Wow.
So I'm a new dad now, 3 times over, and I'm wanting a job I can explain to my kids. I'm wanting a better quality of life, and I'm wanting the opportunity to work with a team of folks, build a culture of excellence, and thrive with people and have some fun and do something meaningful for them and for our customers. So it seemed to me running a business was the way to go. Nobody was all that interested in hiring me to run their business, being a mid-level associate in a law firm. And so my roommate and dear friend, who has a lot of faith in me, said, okay, well, if no one's going to hire you to run a business, we can buy a business that you can run. As my niece later put it, we bought me a job.
Yeah. And at what point did that stop being a job and start being something that became abundant? Like, how long did it take you to turn around this company?
Well, so 3 months in, we realized that far from kind of treading water, this company was sinking like a stone.
Yeah.
All the financial data we had meticulously analyzed were nonsense, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Really, nobody had any idea what was going on, but this company was hemorrhaging money. 2 Harvard guys buy a construction company in Orlando. Like, what could possibly go wrong, right? So that was, one of the worst times of my life. And it was a real challenge to sort of silence my internal critic and harness my strength, and got immense support from friends and family. And like I said, that was about 3 months in. It then took us about a year or so to get to the point where we were fully above water and I could earn a salary again. And it wasn't crisis mode all the time. And then from there, I'm blessed to work with an amazing team of very talented folks, very loyal folks. And we have a great corporate culture. And the thing has just succeeded beyond my wildest imagination. The company's more than 10 times bigger than it was, and it's profitable, and it's all over the state now. And we're just having a blast. So
good for you. Is there anything you wish you'd known as a younger entrepreneur, as a lesson learned that you now have, with the miles you've run later in your career?
I kind of think that's a question that kind of defies the physics of life, right? We learn by doing, right? I mean, strength tested begets strength. You can only build muscles by tearing them. So, to me, it's not necessarily a super helpful construct to go back and say, what would it have looked like had I known X, Y, and Z? Because the journey of it, the joy in it, the progress of it really is, for me, in the actual striving itself. But so that having been said, I had no idea what I was doing. My intentions were good. I had a rough sort of sense of a plan. I tested my thinking with my wife and my family and my friends. I had no idea what I was doing. And that's, the value of the experience.
So how does one apply eyes wide open philosophy to the way you went in and navigated that experience?
Yeah, that sort of crisis mode.
Yeah.
So, I mentioned sort of working hard to try to silence that internal critic. For me, that's, like fear. Like fear, we all have this sort of critic in our minds. That's this like nasty voice. It's quick to pass judgment on us, tell us what we can't do, tell us what others are thinking about us. And the critic sort of presents this idealized world soaring high above it all, this sort of view of perfection, which of course is impossible. And man, that critic can be so overwhelming that we never even bother because we're so convinced that we're beat, before we even get started. So, for me, and Teddy Roosevelt has these sort of famous remarks, right, where he contrasts the critic and the strong man, right? It's not the critic who counts, cold and timid souls and all that stuff. Anyway, for me, Roosevelt's critic is really our fear of failure. And again, juxtaposing it with the strong man, trying to find our inner strength. I would encourage folks, if they're when they're facing that nasty voice, to really hone in on right now, this moment. What is it that I really want to accomplish, right? That critic will swap someone else's definition of success for your own. You won't even notice it. And if you're laboring for someone else's definition of success, you cannot succeed by definition. So step one is always come back to grounding yourself and what is it that you're actually trying to accomplish? And then the question is, what's the best next step, right? You're not going to get from A to Z if you don't get from A to B. I guarantee that. And, don't focus on perfection, on results, on the outcome. Focus on progress, on growth, on the moment.
I love the metaphor. I love the metaphor of just, learn to stop bumping into things, right? It kind of goes back to that.
Yeah. So, that business experience that I had really was, and other experiences in my life, really were for me about this kind of the tug of war for the perspective with which we view our lives between our critic and our inner strongman.
That's a big one though, right? Because most people, if you're watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians or some other bullshit, you have someone else's vision of what success is, what beauty is, what fashion is, all that stuff kind of juxtaposing your psyche, your consciousness. And so how does one pull back from that popular media nonsense to really start thinking about these bigger questions? Because you have to know what that even is to you before you can kind of have that bar to then be able to achieve on your own.
Yeah, so I think that when we're really honest with ourselves, when we want to be honest with ourselves, when we want to be introspective, answering the questions, what's important to me and what matters to me and what does value look like for me, what does success look like for me, I don't think answering those questions is the hard part. I think the hard part really is ignoring that circus you're talking about, right? Ignoring that chaos, that barrage of nonsense that's out there. That's ultimately it's a choice, right? It's turning down the volume. It's taking a moment, 5 minutes to sit alone in quiet and think to yourself, well, what do I want to be doing? How do I want to be spending my time? How does my life compare to how I would describe life well lived for me? And am I willing to confront the fact that to the extent there are any differences, I bear responsibility for those differences? It's a big it's a big leap to take, but it's certainly worth it. It has been in my life.
Yeah, no kidding. What's interesting is I took vows pretty early in my life and became a monk and spent a lot of times with my eyes voluntarily closed to meditate and spend a lot of time thinking about these bigger things and kind of shutting out. It's like you don't have that barrage coming in through your eyes, right? Which is nice. I don't have it coming in through. I don't listen to public radio. I don't watch normal TV anymore. And so a lot of it is also just having a better management program around the inputs of some of that circus to a certain extent, because it is overwhelming, right? You can't watch TV and not get something embedded. But then that's when you have the time to actually think about things. And so my perspective on this, and I'd love to hear, where you find this, because now suddenly you had a very profound shift, is when people stop the circus, there's this kind of intermediary phase where they start to feel kind of restless and bored and not knowing what to do with themselves because that input is something that they're so used to. So it's just this lonely place before you can actually get into that kind of deeper contemplative thought and in that space where you're actually thinking about the stuff that you're alluding to.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's about, trust, trusting yourself, being comfortable with yourself, trusting that, I don't know, there's a poem, Desiderata, by a man named Max Ehrmann. And it's phenomenal. I absolutely love it. But one of the lines that I always think about is, there's no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. And, we take so much nonsense and noise. We take so many burdens onto our shoulders when to stop and think, again, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. And my obligation is to myself, to create the reality that I want to experience. It's hard to do, but it's also there's a piece in it. It's liberating. It's empowering for me. Learning to live eyes wide open. The sort of insights I gained as I went blind, man, they were just liberating.
Well, you've had a couple of these now. I mean, having triplets, that's kind of a kick in the teeth, man. That's a lot at once. So what did that do? Like, how did that change your perspective and your operating system, your outlook really in life?
Yeah, so triplet pregnancy is a complex pregnancy, fraught with risks. And my wife, Dorothy, had an arduous go of it. And we pretty early on confronted some, agonizing information. Some of the medical folks urged us to reduce or eliminate one of the three in particular. There were some concerns about his viability. And there was a suggestion that we were maybe being negligent with respect to the other two by not eliminating one. It was just all sorts of stuff. So, there you go. No doubt the universe is unfolding as it should, and trust and peace. And it was hard, but we kind of fought through it. And then, our kids were born combined. They weighed less than 7.5 pounds. The little guy, the one that we were concerned about along the way, weighed less than 1.5 pounds. And they wound up spending 70 days, 70, in the neonatal intensive care unit. And as a mathematical proposition, miracle upon miracle upon miracle, escaped, every, complication, minor, major, everything in between. And the just astounding magnitude of that blessing in our lives to have these 3 healthy, thriving children is something that is never far from my mind. It is always a ready source of perspective for me. That I am the beneficiary of many cosmic windfalls out there, and there are struggles for life and death going on all around us every day, and so it's hard to take things too seriously.
Yeah, no kidding. I got to ask, what does it feel like to hold a 1-pound baby in your? I don't want to say arm; it's probably hand.
We couldn't hold him.
Right. You just couldn't touch him for basically 70 days.
For weeks, if not a month. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, his head was the size of a lemon. One of his nurses would take her wedding ring off and slide it up his arm over his shoulder.
Wow.
And he was intubated and all. I mean, talk about the miracles of technology and science and healthcare. I mean, a modern NICU, neonatal intensive care unit. I mean, it is conducting a constant symphony of daily miracles. It is amazing what goes on in there.
Mm-hmm.
And but for that symphony, Dorothy and I we wouldn't have any of these children, let alone 3 thriving, healthy ones. And it turned out so great that Dorothy and I decided to have another. So we have a 4th as well now. We have a 15-month-old little baby, Clementine. So triplets are 6.5. The baby's 15 months. And, we're overjoyed.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, I'm really glad you got your head out of the sky is falling, fearful future and just started figuring out how to not bump into things. Because it created a really cool perspective in how you could then metabolize life, one thing at a time. What's in front of you is what you're dealing with, kind of thing. And so what a cool story. Isaac Lidsky, the book is called Eyes Wide Open. I am very happy that you pulled through and found this perspective, because now you're a philosopher and a businessman and a father, and also all these things are really powerful contributions to society, because they're anchored in reality, and kind of makes you the man that you are, and we need more of that. We need more thinkers, and people can think for themselves. So I recommend getting the book, checking out his work, Isaac Lidsky, Lidsky, and let me know what you think. It's Dr. Pedram Shojai, the Urban Monk. I will see you next time.